So you are suspicious. Very good. Because you are listening to the Suspicious Podcast.
Hey, I'm Jan Kitschuk, the host of the Suspicious Podcast and the co-founder of a company called Cyber. We want to enable all people to navigate digital space securely and confidently. We work with social engineering, simulations, and security awareness. Passwords have been used for computer security since early 1960s. So we had 60-something years to learn how to use a password. Guess what's the most popular password today? It's password. If we look at top actions which led to web app hacks or breaches in 2021, we will see that use of stolen credentials has occurred in 82% of cases. When a basic web application gets hacked, it leads to supply chain risk. Supply chain risk leads to other threats. So one could make an assumption that leaked credentials is the keystone of cyber threat right now. If passwords are such a problem, wouldn't it be cool to just remove them, to not have passwords, to let machines do the secret management? Can we even do that? This is a very interesting question, and I really want to know the answer to it. That's why we have Per Thorsheim joining us today. Per is a leading expert in digital authentication and passwords. Let's get into it.
Risk analysis is a magical unicorn to me. I mean, I hear people talk about it all the time, but it's not every day I see people doing a real proper risk analysis. And I also think that for most people, when you're supposed to do risk analysis in your everyday life, most people are not sort of capable of doing that in a proper way. And I'm not going to say I'm capable of it, but I think at least I have a conscious opinion on the risk I'm facing in my daily life. So let's say I'm setting up a new account for a web shop that I'm probably will use to buy a pair of new shoes. Buying a pair of new shoes, that doesn't represent any danger to me. There's nothing. I'm not buying porn. I'm not buying any religious articles or anything like that. Just revealing that I'm buying a couple of new blue shoes that's really not a problem to anyone. Now, I've never been to this website before. There's nothing there of value to me, and so far I just want to look for new shoes. But for some reason, the website says you need to create an account first. In that scenario, because the account doesn't represent any risk to me, chances are pretty high that even I will be using 123456 as the password. Quite simply because, again, as I said, the account doesn't matter to me at all. That's the logical explanation why 123456 is considered to be the most common password in the world. It's not because people are lazy or stupid. It is simply because the account doesn't represent any value to the user whatsoever. And
Okay.
And then I buy new shoes from this website, and maybe I will purchase a book and a CD, or maybe I will purchase some online software to use as an example. And then a typical thing that you will never see happening anywhere is that the website will say, well, now you've given us so much information about yourself. You have given us your credit card that we have stored on file in a hashed version, as an example. And we have quite a bit of information about you. So now we think you should perhaps configure a better password, and maybe it's time to turn on two-factor authentication as well. There are very, very few services online that has that kind of, again, a real life risk approach to how they do business.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I'm trying to preach to companies, that this is something you should do, because people, they don't do this. They don't think about this. They just expect you to have good security and tell you as a consumer if you should do something on your side as the consumer in this.
It makes a lot of sense to do this from the vendor's perspective. Even using services like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Cloudflare has the API with Have I Been Pwned, where you can, there's a database of hacked credentials, and they can prevent you from using one of those leaked credentials, and to say, okay, you're entering password 123. It has been used, 500 million times before that. So don't do that. And you are actually not allowed to create such password. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to say that it really is up to the vendor. I would say that it is the duty of the vendor, of the service provider, to do this, because the end users you can't expect them to be capable of understanding one-factor and two-factor authentication or how biometric works and so on. As an end user, of course, yes, you need to protect your credit card. You need to protect your digital information about yourself, your pictures or videos and personal information. But the thing is, if a website has this shiny little animated GIF saying we are 100% secure and privacy is guaranteed, people believe that, but it's just an animated GIF on the website. So yeah. I don't trust those.
A little shield icon.
Yeah, but again, a little bit back to your question here. A very important topic for me is to stop blaming the end user for bad passwords, for bad PIN codes, or for bad security. That's like, to me, it's like, standing in front of my child smoking and saying you shouldn't smoke because it's dangerous. Do you really expect your child to listen to you if you do that, as an example? And the other way around, also a good example of this. I'm male. I'm 51. I'm way out of shape, so to speak. And I have a mother who was a nurse when she was still working. And whenever I go back home to visit my mom, I will try to talk some sense to her about passwords and pins. And she would just pat my stomach and say, have you been exercising lately? And I'm like, don't change the topic. Passwords is the topic of choice right now. And she says, well, what is more important, your own personal health or your passwords? And that's, well, yeah, mom's got a point in that. And if you have a website, if you are running something that is supposed to be a secure website, people trust that you actually have that. And if you don't, well, you are running a risk, not only for yourself and your business, but also for your consumers. So I think that we really need to stop blaming end users. We keep doing that all the time. And we need to look more into how service providers can actually make their own services more secure and protect the information of their consumers, their customers.
For us working in cybersecurity, we know the risks. We see the news, we see banks being breached, companies being breached, people being targeted, and so on. But for everyday people, the convenience is king.
Convenience really is king.
Blaming the user is the worst thing you can do. It's the responsibility of the vendor, of the website, of the security team, and people who work with users and their employees to make sure that the environment is tailored in a way that will make it convenient for them to follow the security rules, security regulations, policies, and so on. Otherwise, there is always going to be a shadow outside where they do something which is convenient, but they will just hide it from the security team.
Yep. I have a friend in Israel who's working closely with the WASP project. And I've made a T-shirt of a saying that he did several years ago on Twitter. And it says something as simple as security at the expense of usability comes at the expense of security. It's amazingly good, and it's short, sweet, it's fully understandable. It is something as simple as security needs to be very easy to use. Because if it's not, people, users, whatever you want to call them, they will either try to, deliberately break the security rules because they have something they need to do, or at least they will do it unconsciously and just break the rules without actually knowing that they are doing that. So that's a thing also for security people out there. Security needs to be user-friendly. Otherwise, it won't work.
Is that partially why you're so fascinated with passwords and authentication? Because that's a big part of why breaches happen, leaked credentials. If you eliminate that factor from the user, then suddenly digital space becomes way more safe, in my opinion.
Well, I'm sorry to say this, but passwords are never going away. Neither are PIN codes. It's just not going to happen anywhere in the foreseeable future, at least within my lifetime. And I do tend to, my intention is to stay alive for quite a few more years. I know it sounds funny, and people don't want to believe me when I say that, because most people want to get rid of passwords. They want to get rid of PIN codes. They want to get rid of secrets that you have to remember. Well, first of all, there is no risk scenario that justifies the removal of passwords or PIN codes completely. Because all technologies for authentication, be it biometrics or using a hardware token like a FIDO key or a secure ID token, which we used like 15 years ago or anything like that, is more expensive. It's more expensive to the company or the service provider, and it's also more expensive to you as the end user, because somebody has to pay for this technology. Passwords and PINs is something that we have absolutely everywhere. You can find it in any system, and it doesn't cost anything extra to enable the feature of using passwords or PINs. Second, also, this is just a risk perspective, but also from a business perspective. Replacing passwords or PINs with something else is expensive, and there isn't a business need for doing it. And again, with the additional friction that a lot of hardware devices, as an example, will give you as a user, people will most probably actually be happy with passwords and PINs.
Why is it more expensive to replace the traditional credentials? Where does the expense come from?
Well, the expense comes from implementing the additional technology in order to support, as an example, biometrics, because you need a biometric sensor in your phone. And with older phones, you didn't have a camera to, make the picture of your face, and you didn't need a fingerprint sensor to register the fingerprint of your finger. You just had a phone where you could either swipe or you could enter a 4-digit PIN to get in. So adding the additional biometrics costs money, and that makes the phone more expensive for you to buy. There's also a cost in this, in the fact that people know how to use passwords and PINs. I mean, they've been around for 10 and 20 and 13, 40 years now. So they know how it works. If people are to learn how to use fingerprint or face recognition, as an example, you need to do a little bit of training. Now, of course, you don't have to gather 100 people at a time in a room and say, hey, now we are doing 1 hour of how to configure your iPhone with the Face ID. But still, there's a bit of time needed just in the enrollment process to make this work. And not only do you have the enrollment, but if it is Touch ID or Face ID, some people won't be able to make it work on the first attempt. So they will call your customer service. Well, customer service is incredibly expensive to offer to your customers. If you have an incredibly easy to use solution, you don't need that many employees working for your own customer service, as an example. Now, passwords and PINs is easy, cheap, and simple to use. People know how to do that. As soon as you add additional factors, it gets more expensive for you. which means it gets more expensive for the consumer.
Mhm.
Also, you mentioned that, well, you have biometrics on your phone. So I presume that you are using biometrics yourself, Jan.
Yeah.
But my question is, and I don't know if you have an Android phone or iPhone. I would guess an iPhone, but I might be wrong.
Nice
It doesn't
guess.
really matter. Well, most people in Norway do use iPhones. And you have probably configured biometrics on your phone as well. So, and I'm guessing you have a rather new iPhone, so you're using Face ID.
Correct.
But whenever you turn your phone off and turn it on again, you have to enter a PIN code. And in your case, I'm guessing 6 digits. When you are using Face ID today, you know, or you should be aware of the fact that if I stole your phone, and I don't look anything like you, so I probably won't get into your phone using my face. But I can just swipe on the screen and take a guess at your 6-digit PIN instead. Now, the biometric authentication of your face is incredibly good. It's difficult to spoof it. So, with my face, I won't be able to get in. But guessing your PIN isn't really that difficult. We have incredibly good statistics for that. And if you have a 4-digit or 6-digit PIN, we know from statistics that the additional value of going from a 4-digit PIN to a 6-digit PIN is nearly nothing, because people are not using random PIN codes. They are using predictable PIN codes. So now in December, we are getting close to Christmas as we are recording this. So let's say that right about now, a lot of people, if they are setting up a 4-digit PIN for the first time, they might be using 2412. That's Christmas Eve. And it's easy to remember. And since we are getting close to Christmas, that's what they will choose. But if the phone says, well, it needs to be 6 digits, you can't use 2412, well, then they will use 2412 22, because it's 2022 right now. That is predictable. That is easy to guess. And even if a 6-digit PIN actually gives you a million combinations to choose from, you will still probably just choose a PIN code which is 1 out of 100, 200, or something like that. And if I know anything about you, as an example, your birthday, my chances are improving for guessing your PIN code. I don't need that. I don't need your face to get into your phone. I can just have a guess at your PIN code.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Why don't Apple include, for example, the double factor authentication, where you need to enter your PIN code and your Face ID? What's the problem with that?
That's a good point. That's a really good question. And why don't they allow us as end users to configure that? Because we want it, because we're paranoid, or we are working in security, or we have anything really important to protect in our phones. Well, there's a difference between Google and Apple, which is interesting to look at. Apple is all about usability. They are really working hard, and they do great work into making security as usable as possible, as easy as possible on the end user. Google has a bit more of a security-based approach. They try to create better security, but they don't have the good usability that Apple has. So if you want the high security, it's tempting to say, go for an Android phone. If you want the best possible usability, but still really good security, go for Apple. And if either one of these were to create a solution where you could say, I don't want to have the possibility of using a password or PIN at all to get into my phone, you have to do biometrics. On both platforms, chances will be pretty high that people will lock themselves out of their phone. They won't be able to get back in again, either because they have done the enrollment the wrong way, or, your face just changes overnight or over time. And the same with fingerprints. And if people suddenly were to find out that, oh shit, I can't get into my phone because my face has changed, well, then you've lost your phone and you've lost your data. And there is no way to recover access, as an example. So that's sort of a reason for why there is it's not a backdoor, but it's called a PIN code. And a good advice here is that, even for you as well, if you have a 6-digit PIN code today, I would say, I would sort of recommend you to change that into something else than just a 6-digit PIN code. It can be a 12-digit PIN code, or it can be a traditional simple password, because that will be incredibly harder for any attacker to guess compared to a 4 or 6-digit PIN, in case they, decide to just bypass the biometrics and have a go at your password or PIN.
Your reference towards face changing hits the base. After a good night out, return home, it's quite likely that the phone might not recognize you. Things like FIDO, correct me if I pronounce it wrong, it's a bunch of big enterprises working together to essentially create a protocol or standards for authentication. So even though passwords probably will be there, it's not going anywhere with your credit card and things like that. Still, if it's unified across multiple platforms, isn't there a way that we could at least move away from the password in its traditional sense? And just as with my iPhone, I have biometrics for most of the logins, and then I have PIN code for when I reboot or restart the phone. In the same way, couldn't there be a similar standard or similar platform where I have a password for my Google account, let's say, but then my typical login would still be done through multiple factors? And I'm not just talking stuff like biometrics, but perhaps also your typing patterns, your digital trace, IP address, device, all those things taken together. Wouldn't that be sort of where we could move in the future, or how do you see it?
Yeah, and I work as the CISO for BankID Bank Accept in Norway, and the European Union has requirements for authentication and identification at different levels. So if you are to do anything that has to do with banking, if you are doing anything related to health, as an example, if you're ordering a doctor's appointment, or if you are looking up what kind of medications you need to purchase online, there are requirements for how strong that identification and authentication needs to be. And the European Union says, and I fully agree, that a username and a password alone is not enough. I mean, there's no discussion about that. It's just not good enough. We need the additional factor. And in a multi-factor configuration, of course, we could say that, well, instead of using passwords or PINs at all, the two factors could be having a physical device like your phone and using Face ID to authenticate to the phone. So the physical device and your face becomes two factors, and those two in combination gives you access to whatever you need to get access to. And can we do that? Sure, we could create that today. Would that be secure? Well, that would be a very long podcast to talk about all the different issues that we might have with that. Because removing one technology and replacing it with a new technology, that solves some problems, some usability problems. It also introduces new usability and security problems as well. That's important to remember here. So the reason for why this isn't done yet is because it's expensive and it's difficult.
So what do we do?
Well, I can repeat this for until the end of my life, and we're not getting rid of passwords or PIN codes. They will be a part of the mix. But what we can do, we can hide the password and PIN from you in your everyday life, like you do today with your iPhone, because in most cases, you only use your face to authenticate your phone. Now, you experience sometimes with your iPhone that the phone says, I'm sorry, I can't really see you there because, it's really dark in the room, as an example, so the camera can't see your face. And then we'll do the fallback to, well, you need to enter your PIN code. Now, if we could perfect this, if we could say that the only time you need to enter your PIN is whenever your phone is actually like dead, it's out of power, so you need to restart it again. That would mean that in most cases, it could be days, weeks, months, I don't know, a full year between every time you actually reboot your phone. Now, if you had a long, strong, complex password for your phone, and you only had to enter that password once a year, what do you think the probability is you will actually forget the password in a year?
That's quite high.
It's quite high. And then users will call the bank or whoever it is and say, oh, shit, I forgot my password, so I can't get in. What do I do now? Now, if the answer to that question is, well, we can't do anything because all your data is encrypted, so it's game over, man. You just, you need to get yourself a new phone, a new account, and whatever you have in there is just gone. Now, go to your boss and say, hey, boss, we have created this amazing new 100% secure solution. So nobody will ever be able to hack into your data, boss. And your boss says, wow, awesome. I want that. And then you say, yeah, but there's one caveat. You can never forget your PIN or your password, or you can never cut your fingers because then you won't be able to use Touch ID. And you can never grow a big beard or get a scar in your face because that will mess up the facial authentication. And if you do that, we can't get you back into your account. All your data, all your documents are gone. Do you think your boss would like to say, yes, I'd like to purchase that solution? Because what you're essentially selling him is a solution that doesn't have a backup. That's a hard sell to do. And that's also a reason for why we have passwords and PIN codes. It's a last resort how to get back into your account again. And account recovery is still a major problem to a lot of people, and it's also a major security challenge to any service provider. How do we do password recovery and account recovery for our customers? That's expensive, and it's hard to find a good way to do it where we take care of both usability and the security aspect.
With account recovery right now, what do you think is the safest way for vendors to proceed with that?
There is no best way. This, again, right. Go back to the beginning. This is about doing risk analysis. What kind of data do you have for your customers? What kind of services are you providing for them? In many cases, if the only thing you do is to sell blue shoes for adult men between 13 and 50 years old of age, then what's the problem? Why do you need anything else than why do you even need an account? So you're just selling shoes. And in many cases, you wouldn't need an account for buying that. Just input your address and give them credit card information for a single purchase of your card, and that's it. You don't need the account at all. There is no good answer to your question. There are so many ways to do account recovery, and you always need to do a risk analysis to figure out what is the correct way for you to do it. You could hire consultants to assist you in doing the risk analysis and the usability versus security evaluation that you need to do in this to figure out what kind of account recovery do you need, what kind of recovery should you provide for your users. But I can't say that this is the solution you should do because, again, I don't know what kind of services you are providing. I don't know your customers, nothing.
That's very interesting insight. I was really hoping you will say that Passwordless is coming, but
well, Passwordless is coming in many cases, and I'm at work. I'm also trying to configure Passwordless for for my co-workers. But we need to look into what you mean by passwordless, because in most cases, it is not solutions where you never have to use passwords anymore. They are more like you don't have to use a password every hour, every day, every time you unlock your computer. You don't have to do that, but you will probably have to use a password or PIN code every now and then. As an example, when you're booting your phone or your laptop at work. And to me, that's sort of, well, close to passwordless.
Especially combined with things like password managers and different IAM solutions.
Absolutely.
One of the things which could really help to increase awareness with social medias is people knew how much of a pain in the ass it is to recover the account.
I mean, I've seen, and you know, in a way, I shouldn't be laughing about this at all, because this is way too often this is a tragedy to people. I mean, they lose access to their Facebook account, to Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and so on, and it causes real problems for them. You're using a free service, and it's free because you are the product. You get to see a lot of ads on whatever service you're using. That's how they, you know, pay for the service that you think is free. But when you lose access to your account, you know, there are just too many people thinking that I can just call customer service and they will give me access to my account again. That's not how it works. That just doesn't work for services like Facebook, as an example. There is no Facebook customer service that you can call and say, "Hi, it's Per. Somebody hacked my account. Can you fix it? I'll just hold while you do it." It doesn't work that way. A lot of people are really facing that as a problem, as a challenge, in a really bad way, and that's when they realize that no, you won't. You have lost access to your account, and you can't get back in again. And now the bad hackers have access to your pictures, to your friends, to your videos, to all your text messages, and so on. And that really becomes a personal disaster to people.
The question of social media scam is quite interesting on multiple vectors as well. Have you encountered any problems with phishing done through social media? Perhaps through LinkedIn and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I get phishing messages in all channels from time to time, of course, and I have assisted way too many family members dealing with this kind of crap, and also friends and colleagues and so on. And again, the attackers are really good at trying to convince you or to scare you or to frighten you into doing whatever they want you to do. And the old rules of it, if it is too good to be true, then it's not true. Don't make any rash decisions. Think about it. If you are in doubt, ask a friend, ask a family member, do you think this is for real? I mean, we said that to people 30 years ago and 20 years ago and 10 years ago, and we did that yesterday. And we need to continue to tell people that if you are feeling unsafe or unsure about something, ask a friend, ask a family member, ask a colleague, do you think this is fraud? It's that simple. We can do a lot of technical stuff to improve security and privacy, but most importantly is ask a friend.
What can companies do to get this risk more? A lot of attacks happen due to human element, 82%. To be precise.
This is not the perfect solution, but this is something that a lot of companies and services can do that they don't do today. And this is advice for free, and this is incredibly easy to do for anyone. What you see today is a lot of companies and services are saying there's a new round of scams going around by text message or by email and so on, and it's not us. So don't click the link, don't get scammed. But what they can do, what they should do, what they don't do today, is to create a simple web page where they, companies and services, they tell people like you, like me, we are the security technical geeks, I guess. They could create a web page where they say, how do we communicate to our customers? In which channels? Here's a link to our official Facebook page. Here's a link to our official Twitter channel. Here are the phone numbers that we will be using when we are calling you, if we are ever to call you. This is the number to our support service. If you ever sign up for newsletters from us by email, the newsletters will look, like this, and they will be coming from this email address, and it's actually being sent by this third-party email vendor. Because today, a challenge that I see all the time is when I get something that looks like spam or some kind of phishing attempt, it's very hard to me to figure out, is this actually for real? It's actually coming from a bank or from any kind of, online shoe store? Or is it actually a scam? So companies really should put up some more information on a single web page saying, these are our official channels. If we ever communicate with you, we will be using one of these channels. And if you get contacted through any other channel, like a Facebook direct message, or maybe from a Snapchat account that is not listed by us, it is not us, and you should report it back to us, and we'll look into it.
It definitely will help if you want to check, but that's the problem. People will not remember it. People will not necessarily go to those pages. I received the email from dnb.co. Is it actually the bank's email address? The problem is they need to get that question.
Yeah,
they need to be suspicious.
Yeah, and most people won't be suspicious, and they won't remember to look up the page of a bank, as an example, with the information about the bank's official channels online. Most people will never do that. I will do that. I hope you will do it. And as long as we can teach, a couple of hundred people in Norway to do this, that increases our chances as banks, as shoe stores online, or whatever kind of service you're providing. It will increase our chances of someone who is interested and competent into looking into security. We will enable them to identify scams and spam and alert us as service providers. We don't need many people to do that. If we have a couple of hundred or a few thousands in Norway out of a population of 4 million or 5 million, then that will be very, very helpful to everyone.
So kind of the networking effect within citizens or people. We started working within human security awarenesses or human error. We saw that the tech is covered pretty well. There are a lot of tools there to help you with vulnerability assessments, network assessments, web assessments. We actually started from web assessment and web vulnerability scanner. Consulted a company. They wanted to improve their security posture. And one of the things which I found out was that they have an Excel sheet with passwords. And at that point, I'm thinking, all right, whatever you guys do, you will get hacked.
Yeah,
but this company, they definitely see the news. They definitely know cyber attacks happen. It's just, again, this convenience factor. And I'm thinking, what else can we do as security professionals, as a security community? What else can we do to mitigate that risk, to divert it away from human element towards tech element? Because tech element is where, the geeks have the power.
There are a lot of things we can do with the technology. We could do a deep dive into technologies available or technologies that we have on our wish list for Christmas that will help us to, ensure data doesn't leak online and people don't do anything wrong and so on. But in the end, we in most cases we end up with the human element. And again, it is important to me to say, stop blaming end users for bad security, for bad passwords, and so on. And there's so much more we can do on the server side, on the service provider side, to improve security for our employees and for our customers and so on. But obviously, yes, there's a lot of tech that we can look into as well. And that is, again, connected to this concept of, security at the expense of usability comes at the expense of security. Security needs to be easy. And if you can stop looking for advanced technology that can do all kinds of, magical tricks for, preventing data leaks, and spend a little bit more time looking into security technology that is easy to use, I think we may have a winning situation there. We need to make security easier for people in order to actually improve security.
Could you share some war stories with us, some spicy CISO stories from the war front?
Well, I have way too many of them. One of the funny stories that I've experienced throughout my career and my interest in passwords happened many years ago. This was a situation where I was doing password auditing for a large company. And what I did, I extracted information from Windows Active Directory. I extracted information as username, the full name of the user, address and phone number and stuff like that had been entered into the information about each user. I also extracted 2 time and date fields. One of them was the last logon time, and I also extracted the date and time of the last password reset. And I extracted this information rather frequently from this company over time. So I would have a data set where I could essentially see when was the last time Jan logged in and when was the last time Jan changed his password. And then I also did password cracking. So I cracked the passwords of a lot of people working in this organization in order to generate statistics. So it was never a goal to hack anything, and it was never a goal to point the finger and say, hey, you have a really shitty password. There's no point in doing that. People will just get mad at you. And with this data set, this organization also had a password policy that required people to change password, I think it was every 60 or 90 days. They also had a policy saying that you cannot use the previous 24 passwords that you have used. That's you can't use the past 24 passwords. That's pretty hefty. That's a policy that very few will ever configure. But this company had that. So what I had was a data set where I could see up to 24 generations of people's passwords. That when you have that kind of data, it gets pretty cool. And then I asked a colleague who was a developer. I asked him if he could help me to do a little bit of scripting or put the data into a database and so on. And he said, yeah, sure, I can do that. What are you looking for? Well, so I have this data where I have usernames and I have the current password, but I also have the previous passwords that this particular user have been using for, say, 20 generations back in time. And I also have the date and time for the last login and the last time the password was changed. And he said, okay, that's a couple of fields, easy to handle in the database. But what are you looking for? Well, what I'm looking for is, and this is just a theory that I have, but I think there might be people that every time they have to change their password. They will actually change their password 24 times using a small script or something. And then they will go back to use the exact same password that they have been using for many, 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 many years. Honestly, I swear to God, I did not know, but my colleague blushed like a tomato and said, "Shit, how did you know?" Now, seriously, do you do that? Yeah, I have this little script, and I've been doing this for, I don't know, 20 years at least. Because I just can't remember passwords, he said, except this one that I created like more than 20 years ago. So every time I'm forced to change a password, in this setting in particular, I have this small script that just changes my password 24 times and then sets it back to the password that I've been using the entire time for more than 20 years. And now, he said, you have messed it up because now you know my password and you also now know of my little routine. So now I have to come up with something new. And he was like pretty sad, and I just couldn't stop laughing at him for the entire day and say, dude, I'm sorry, but maybe you learn now.
That's pretty sophisticated, you know.
Not everybody comes up with that idea, and no. I've told this story, Jan. I've told this story to quite a little bit of people in different talks that I've done, and especially in a room with a lot of developers present. You know, I see two kind of reactions. Reaction number one is people just start laughing because that is so funny, and imagine the face of that guy being sort of exposed at like, yeah, I'm doing that. And the other half of the audience, they go like, whoa, that's a pretty good idea. I could do that.
Yeah, instead of adding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on till 24, actually make it a little bit more creative with some scripting. Yeah, that's
you hadn't thought about that, did you?
No, not at all. No, thank God NIST and Microsoft have changed their approach. It's been very important to just remove that policy. It's extremely. That's what I mean. It's not taking human behavior into consideration. It's looking at what would be technically sound. This phrase which you mentioned about the convenience is just a perfect description. You will not have any security if you undermine the convenience factor.
Yep, exactly.